support services that were available for first-generation college students. I had close relationships with people on the administration and faculty, and continued my leadership development. An internship that an administrator at the college helped me to organize led me to a private liberal arts college in Massachusetts. There I experienced an educational environment that was completely different than anything I had experienced before. The focus of the college was really academic excellence. The faculty was incredibly diverse from many different countries. There were practicing artists and researchers in charge of almost every class that I took. I was terrified of them, their experience, and the gulf between that educational environment and the ones I had been in before. I didn't talk once in any class that I had for my entire first semester. I did work very hard. At community college, I had been a tutor in the Writing Center. At Smith College, I went to the Writing Center with every paper that I ever turned in, sometimes more than once. I worked very hard. I started to talk by the end of my senior year. I didn't shut up. But the students, on the other hand, were extremely homogenous. The vast majority of the student body at that college was incredibly financially privileged. I found out later that many of them had never set foot in a public school, perhaps never will. It created a lot of social isolation, and that created a lot of stereotyping and assumptions. Socially, that college was not a comfortable environment for me. I still felt estranged from the curriculum, I felt estranged from the college community, and I felt estranged from my peers. A positive experience that we had, or one of the most positive experiences for me at Smith, was the way that they prepared us to function, though, in environments that I had previously not been exposed to. I felt totally comfortable attending fundraisers and networking events. So there's a whole level of education, I think, that goes on in environments like that that take place outside of the classroom. It's education and cultural capital and how to access that. That's something that many of our students who are educated solely in the public schools miss out on. It is a limiting factor. And then I became a teacher. I didn't plan to become a teacher. I planned to become a lawyer. I thought that that was a sufficiently high status career to deserve all the work, or to warrant all the work that I had put in college. My family was thrilled with my choice, which is good because I was doing it for my family. My first day of law school, I realized that it was not for me. It was definitely not for me, which was a crisis in my mind because I had gotten a scholarship to Tulane in New Orleans. I had moved across country, and I had no plan B. After my first day of law school, I was cleaning up the kitchen, and I had a statue of the Virgin on the top of my sink. She fell off the top of the sink, and she was decapitated. Her head fell off, and everything else about the statue was completely sound. I took it for a sign, and I did not go back to law school. Besides the morning visit I played the next day to refuse my scholarship and let them know that I was going to have to return home due to a family crisis. I didn't have the wherewithal at that age to tell the truth, but I did know how to get out of the situation. So I prayed extensively and asked for some direction in what I should do. I went to St. Louis Cathedral, the one on the square in the picture, and then when I emerged from Mass, I saw a tarot card reader sitting in front of the cathedral. I thought, well, that's the perfect vehicle for my son. I sat down, got my tarot cards read, and the reader explained to me that there were 3 cards that indicate the legal system and only one that indicates the educational system. None of the legal cards came up in my reading, but the education card did. So I said, I'll become a teacher. And I did. And I stumbled on my first teaching experience in largely the same way. My first teaching experience was in Minneapolis. It was at a self-contained EBD school, a level 4 federal setting for any of you that know it about the special ed world. It means these students have been in other educational settings and they were not successful to the point where they had to be removed and placed in a more restrictive environment. These students had incredibly hard lives. Nothing in my own public school education, despite my middle school, or my junior high, despite any of it, had prepared teaching at that school, we took an inter-grade group of secondary students down to the government center to get picture IDs, so they could do all the kind of wonderful things you can do when you have a picture ID. They found the computers where you can go look up people's criminal records pretty quickly, and before we could stop them, some of them started to look up their relatives' criminal records. One of the middle school girls that I taught accessed her mother's criminal record and found prostitution charges on it, which was not a surprise to her. What was a surprise to her was when she started, unfortunately, applying her math skills to her mom's criminal record. She discovered that her mother had been arrested for prostitution when she was pregnant with her. It was, to date, the hardest experience of my teaching career. I don't think anything can really prepare a person to deal with that, besides empathy. But with a group of students that see that much outside of school, there's a lot of suspicion, I think, of authority figures. And I went through a long process of trying to earn my students' respect. It was something like hazing. With EBD students, that could take some really, really intense forms. They called me a lot of names. They insulted everything about my physical appearance and mental abilities that they could find to insult. But when I didn't leave, they eventually started to open up to me. Thankfully, with most students, the process is a lot milder than it is with EBD students, but I think that we all go through that when we meet a new group of students. One of the things I tried to focus on in my first teaching position was culturally relevant curriculum. I tried to make every single thing I taught culturally relevant. We were planning to go on a trip to the art museum, and I started off teaching my students a long unit on African art, anything I could find. They couldn't have cared less. They hated the topic. They hated every moment that I devoted to it. We did a biographical study of Malcolm X, though, and that was much more successful. So culturally relevant curriculum, it's not always a hit, but through persistence, I think you can find what resonates with your students. When we finally got to go, I also tried to emphasize taking my students out into the community. It's something that I find that all students love, leaving the school building. I love it myself when I get to go do a site visit at another school. When I took my students, my group of EBD students, on a field trip to the Minneapolis Institute of Arts at the culmination of our unit on African art, they had a great time. Of course they embarrassed me. Of course their behavior was awful. One of my students walked by a statue, male student, male statue, and grabbed onto the statue's genitals and stood there and waited for someone to take a picture of him and asked us all to take a picture of him. And a community, or one of the security guards very calmly walked by him and made a joke. Everyone cracked up. And the moment was lost its power. However, the power of their experience of the museum, for some of them, the first time they had visited a museum, was a lot more important than my few seconds of embarrassment. The family relationships in that teaching setting were especially hard. There was little to nothing. I remember trying to call home for a student one time and discover that his mother had